Barrier filtered from the cask to remove char particles, and that's all that comes between you and your Laphroaig. Well, that and colouring. Welcome back, Whisky folk. It is the big one. It's Laphroaig 10 cask strength. It's something that I look forward to every year, and it's something that it's probably the only one that I never go without. I've been following this one for a really long time, and it never disappoints. It's just one of those icons of whiskey and absolutely an icon of Islay. And the fact that this stuff is still reasonably affordable makes it an almost guaranteed purchase every year for me. Believe it or not, we are actually on batch 17 now. Doesn't time fly? So this one here, Laphroaig 10 cask strength batch 17. This one is 10 years old. It's bottled at full cask strength, which this year is 58.3%. We're told that it's bottled in November 2023, which is interesting because it means it gives us a little glimpse into how they're producing this and the fact that this stuff has been resting in the bottles for quite a long time, which is never a bad thing. Certainly never hurts, but I thought it was interesting that they seem to be very organised. They're getting these batches together well in advance, and you have to wonder if that's because the batches are, we have to assume, phenomenally large, because this stuff, you can get batches from previous years going back 2 or 3 years, maybe more at this point. So availability for this stuff is really, really good, at least here in the UK, and I think America as well. You can find this in a lot of places. It's not something that goes out of stock quickly. In fact, quite the opposite. We are told that this is barrier filtered, as I joked about in the intro there, and they don't actually use the words non-chill filtered, but you would like to think that the fact that they're calling this barrier filtered probably tells us that it's not chill filtered as well. Personally, being Laphroaig, I'm always a little bit wary of them because they are crap at their presentations and they're crap at telling us as well. There's been multiple Laphroaig expressions in the past which may or may not be chill filtered, and they don't always tell you either way on the bottle what they've actually done. So I personally trust Laphroaig about as far as I can throw them when it comes to presentation, but we are told that it's barrier filtered. What's more worrying than that though is that there's still, in 2024, no mention that I can see either way about colouring. And considering how blasé Laphroaig are about chill filtration, offering proper ABVs on some of their expressions and transparency, I would assume that this has got a bit of colour in it. And to be honest, as I've said before, even if we do get some info from the distillery that says that this stuff is natural colour, which I don't think we will, the fact that they don't guarantee it on the label automatically, leaving the option open to colour as and when needed, is a massive problem. You might have also noticed that the presentation has rather drastically changed. It's still recognisable as Laphroaig, I think, but this, especially the outer packaging, looks very, very different, and you might have seen this on things like the Laphroaig 10-year-old is now in a rectangular cuboid cardboard box, and I think Laphroaig Select, which has now also been renamed to Laphroaig something, Oak Select. I think that's what it's called now. Might actually be interesting to get a bottle of that and give it a review at some point. I bought a bottle when Laphroaig Select was first released and it was not good, but that was quite a few years ago now, and the price is not bad. So yeah, changed presentation. The label is still similar, although it's now got this crinkly matte effect on it. I think they've monkeyed around with the fonts a little bit. They've also put some sort of italic calligraphy effect writing on there. A little bit of marketing. I think on the labels it's mainly the texture and the fonts have changed a little bit. But whereas before we always used to get our Laphroaigs in the iconic round white tube, it's now in this fairly more mundane box. Quite funny, they've actually taken to telling you how to pronounce Laphroaig on the box now as well. And they've also gone with a little tagline, a little slogan at least for the cask strength expression, which is the powerful one. I think that's a little bit cringy. Doesn't make any difference to the whiskey, but like tasting notes, I think that they are almost entirely a waste of time. And telling us that a 10-year-old cask strength Laphroaig is powerful seems a little bit redundant. So I don't hate, or I don't even dislike the new rebrand when it comes to the packaging. I think that it still looks really, really good. It still looks like Laphroaig, but I do kind of miss the old iconic round white tube. We've just had it for so many years, decades, and it was so different, so eye-catchingly, instantly recognisable. This does seem like a little bit of a downgrade, although, to be fair, it is probably a little bit more environmentally friendly. It probably saves a little bit on production costs, and the box is all flat pack, so it probably saves a little bit on transportation costs as well. And if we're honest, it's probably a matter of time until Laphroaig does away with the box entirely. Anyway, let's get some in the glass and see what it's like. Stopper's been redesigned as well. I think they used to be white plastic, didn't they? They are now wood. Appears to be solid wood. Laphroaig 10 cask strength, that is the colour by the way. I think it's a little bit darker than most of the previous batches, slightly. Personally, I think the colour of that does look quite artificial, but there you go, it's Laphroaig on the nose. Really quite a fruity batch of the 10 cask strength. Fruity cherries, red fruits and cherries, cherry throat sweets. Really quite oaky on the nose as well. Lots of very active, freshly sawn oakiness. As well as a little bit of wood spice, cinnamon, wood spice, toasted oak, and quite a medicinal note. So cinnamon, clove and cough sweets. Also quite a vanilla note in the oakiness on the nose. Vanilla and caramel and quite a strong ashiness. Ash and wood smoke, as well as a little bit of a farmy cowsheds note and completely out of the blue quite a lactic quality. And I find that really interesting. I really like whiskies that have a lactic note, a creamy dairy character to them, and it's not something that I've noticed in Laphroaig, at least not for a lot of years. Certainly not something that I've noticed in the batch 16 or 15, or probably any of the ones that I've reviewed on here, to be honest. It's something that I really like. Very fruity, very oaky, creamy, medicinal. Let's see how it tastes. Again, quite oaky on the palate. Oakier than a lot of batches of the 10CS. Quite an astringent, peppery oakiness, as well as quite a salty, smoked fish note. Really excellent, dense flavours. Lots of dense oak, very medicinal, TCP, and a note that I quite often get on Laphroaigs is a little bit of a mintiness, like a spearmint note. That's something that I've seen on quite a few Laphroaigs. In particular, I think the 15 used to have quite a bit of that. Does that suggest that this is a little bit older than 10? Possibly, possibly not. Could just be one of those things. Let's have another sip. Quite a sourness to the oakiness on the palate, and that's not something that I was getting on the nose, but on the palate I think that there's a distinct sweet and sour, slightly liminess to the wood smoke. It's just got that kind of slightly sharp fruitiness to the oak element that really grabs your tongue, grabs your taste buds. And I really like that too. I like my sharp and sour whiskies. So although that is only one element to this whiskey, it is there and I like it. Lots of maltiness on the palate of this one. And it's a rather sweet, rounded maltiness. But intertwined with that heavily peated Islay character, you're getting lots of malt spirit notes that just remind you that this is a barley spirit. I also think that this batch of Laphroaig 10CS is quite bourbonised. And by that, I don't mean that it's just dominated by the bourbon cask, which bourbon cask is always very, very much at the forefront of any modern Laphroaig, because they do love their first fill bourbon casks. But with this one, I'm also getting a sense of kind of drinking a peated medicinal, very oaky bourbon. And I think that's just a mixture of the sweet, fruity cherries and the reasonably heavy new oak. But absolutely not a bad thing. It's not an overly sweet, cloying Laphroaig 10 cask strength like what I found in the batch 13 and 14 were a little bit on the sweet bourbon side. And I think that was a little bit too much for me. Let's have one more sip and look at the finish. Very long finish, excellent intensity, excellent stamina. The finish really goes on, even more so than some of the other batches of Laphroaig 10 cask strength, probably better than the majority. Long finish, sweet, smoky, peppery, with that dry, slightly papery oakiness. So, you might have guessed, I love this stuff. I love every batch of Laphroaig 10 cask strength, and I think that this is another really, really good one. I think that it's a fantastic return to form with a slightly more oaky and bitter, salty 10 cask strength, but also really well balanced with lots of raw power peatiness, sweet malt and bourbon cask. In some ways, I do think that this batch 17 is a little bit of an odd one because it has that slightly creamy lactic character on the nose. That really shocked and surprised me because that wasn't the kind of thing that I expected going into this whiskey, but it's a really nice thing and I think that it works really well. And that little hint of mint on the palate as well. There's a few things in there that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but all good things. So in short, if you're considering buying this, you should. If you are a fan of cask strength whiskey and a fan of heavily peated Islay whiskey, you don't even need to consider this one. If you can find it at a good price, just get it. And in particular, this batch 17, I think that they're kind of on a roll with these recent batches, 15, 16 and 17, have all been stunners. And I think that in terms of style, I think that this 17 probably falls in between the 15 and 16 when it comes to style, because you always get batch variations on a Laphroaig 10 cask strength. I think that the 15, which I absolutely loved, had that fruitiness. The 16 really leaned heavily into this dry, salty oak. This one is kind of in the middle. But I think that this batch 17, rebranding aside, it's really the epitome of heavily peated Islay malt. Without a doubt, the 10 cask strength is the Laphroaig fans' Laphroaig. Let me know what you think about this one if you've had it. How do you think it compares to the other batches? I will be doing another follow-up video, hopefully fairly soon, where I compare this to the previous batch, because that's always a fun and interesting thing to do. But let me know what you think of this. Like me, is this an essential purchase for you? Price is possibly a little bit high. I can't actually remember what I paid for this. I think it was 70 something. But you actually see this stuff go on offer as well, occasionally. And if you look and you're willing to accept one of the earlier batches, which are all good, you'll probably find a deal online for one of these batches below recommended retail, because the availability that Laphroaig are giving us is that good. But I think 70 something pounds for this 10 years old cask strength Laphroaig is fantastic. Let me know what you think. If this is something that appeals to you, I hope that wherever you are, you're able to get one. Thanks for watching, and cheers.